Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Monet Idrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book and empowerment coach for Muslims. In today's podcast, I'll be speaking about how to raise problematic teenagers and what happens when they first come into contact with their qareen. So this podcast is going to be a follow-up from the previous one about the spiritual world of children. So I would like for you to understand how this evolves and what they see and what they interact with once they reach the age of puberty, and it will explain to you why their behaviour is so erratic and so problematic when they get to this stage of life, okay? So it's really important for you to have this understanding so that you can establish the right approach when you're dealing with teenagers, and especially when they are becoming very narcissistic. So this doesn't apply to all teenagers, because you do get teenagers who are very empathic and they're wonderful people. But this podcast will mainly be about those who are troubled, because again, I get so many clients coming to me with this problem and they are in despair because they don't know how to deal with their awful teenagers who are behaving in a really toxic way. So this podcast is going to explain to you why they behave in such a toxic manner and how you can, inshallah, deal with it. So as always, I'd love to kindly ask you to like, share and subscribe to the channel. Do share this podcast with people whom you feel could benefit from it. If you're new to the channel, you are welcome here, and I hope that you benefit from the podcast. So do go through them in order if you can, so you can get a very comprehensive understanding of everything, and so you can understand what I'm talking about in my latest podcast, because there are many things that I'm not going to repeat. So if you get the time, do go through them in order so you can benefit. And if you get the time, do grab a copy as well of my book, The Muslim Narcissist. It is packed full of information that will really help you, inshallah, understand yourself and the people around you, and it will give you a good kickstart to your healing journey. And if you need one-to-one counselling and coaching, I've provided the link below. Just click on it and it will take you to a form you can fill out, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So let's start with defining who a teenager is in Islam. Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, رفع القلم عن ثلاثة عن النائم حتى يستيقظ وعن الصبي حتى يشب وعن المعتوه حتى يعقل, which means that the pen, the recording pen of the angels, is lifted from three people: a sleeping person until they awaken, a child until they reach the age of puberty, and an insane person until they regain their sanity. So when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentions that the pen is lifted, it means that their sins are not recorded, okay? Because the person who is sleeping is unaware of what they're doing. Sometimes people sleepwalk, right? So if they do anything while they're sleepwalking, it's not considered to be a recorded sin because they're unaware, they're unconscious, they're not aware of what they're doing. And when it comes to a child before the age of puberty, they're still in the phase of life where they're learning right from wrong. So anything wrong that they do isn't counted as a sin, it's counted as a mistake that they learn from. Okay, so if they, shout back at their parents, for example, he might be 7, 8 or 9 years old, and it becomes the parents' duty to teach their children that this approach is wrong, that healthy communication is needed, that they can communicate kindly, and that this is considered to be rude and bad manners and so on, right? So this is a phase of life where they're still learning, so they're not accountable. Now, as for the person who is considered to be insane, it's basically the loss of intellectual ability to be able to navigate life normally. So, for example, someone who is schizophrenic might be considered as being in a state of insanity because what they do in that time when they're having an episode, they're unaware of, right? They're not aware of what they're doing. They might lash out at people, they might be rude, they might, commit sins or do something that hurts other people, but because they're genuinely not aware of what they're doing, they're classified as insane and they're not held accountable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. So Allah requests that the angels who record their good and bad deeds to lift the pen, so they don't write the sins of the person who is absent in mind, so that they're not accountable for it. So this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows some people to be insane in the world as an example for others to be grateful for the ni'mah, the blessing of having a brain, right? Having intellect that they can navigate life with, because there are people out there who don't have it. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows people that this was what your life would be like if I did not create the human being with a high level of intellect. Okay, so it's for people to show gratitude. It's for people to appreciate and say Alhamdulillah for the intellect He gave us. Now, many people might say, well, this is unfair on the person who is schizophrenic. Well, Allah compensates that person by not holding him accountable for anything in this dunya. Okay, whereas the person who has intellect will be accountable for everything. So Allah is just. And on the Day of Judgment, the person who was schizophrenic in this life will be grateful for that schizophrenia, will be so grateful for the insanity that they were tested and trialed with. Okay, so don't think that these people are, treated unfairly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the Day of Judgment, they will be very happy people when they see everyone else lining up for their hisab. And remember, there are many people who can actually become insane. They can lose their mind as a result of severe stress. And this is why I do the work that I do, because narcissistic abuse has pushed a lot of people into insanity. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that quickly so that you understand why these three people are grouped together. And you can find this hadith in Sunan at-Tirmidhi. So in general, the most prominent scholars, they all agreed that the age of puberty is based on the biological maturity of a human being. So when a boy reaches the age where he has his first wet dream, this is an indication that he has now entered the age of puberty. Okay, because now he has the ability to expel liquid semen from his body, which means that he is now capable of getting a young woman pregnant. And the indication for girls that they have reached the age of puberty is the onset of their menstrual period. So the day they get their menstrual period is the day they have entered the new phase of life of being adolescents, right? So now she has the capability of being impregnated by someone. So now your sins are accountable for, okay, because that can now happen. And this is the stage of baligh aqil. Okay, baligh is when you reach the age of sexual maturity, and aqil is when you reach the intellectual age of knowing right from wrong. Okay, so when you get to the age of baligh aqil, you are now considered to be a human being who will be accountable for your choices in life. You'll be accountable for your sins, and you'll be accountable for missing the furud, which are all of the Islamic obligations that are now upon you as a Muslim. And these are the obligations that your parents would have had to teach you. So your parents will be accountable on the Day of Judgment for not teaching you the Islamic obligations, for example, the 5 daily prayers, fasting in Ramadan, and all of these things. They will be accountable for not teaching them to you before the age of puberty. Okay, because it's a parent's job to prepare you for this phase of life so that you can make the right decisions for yourself. You can be God conscious in your actions. And this is why many parts of the world, especially in the Arab world, as soon as a girl gets her menstrual period, her father requests her to wear the hijab, because it's an indication that she is now matured sexually and she needs to be protected from adolescent boys who will be quite, hormonal, and they're experiencing new feelings in their bodies and everything. So it is the responsibility of a woman's wali to make sure that she's protected, especially when it comes to how she dresses when she leaves the house, so that she doesn't receive unwanted attention, especially now she's in a vulnerable situation where she can now get pregnant at a very young age. And this is a huge crisis for many Muslim fathers in the West who have to deal with their daughters going to mixed schools and not knowing what happens, behind closed doors at school or after school. So I hear it all the time from fathers, how they're always paranoid, and it's their biggest fear that something will happen to their daughters who are mixing with boys in external environments outside of the home, and they become very strict and controlling when it comes to the protection of their daughters, and this can sometimes cause the rebellion of their daughters as a result of the wrong approach being taken when you teach your children or when you request them to do certain things to protect them from harm. Okay, so sometimes the wrong approach can backfire onto you and can cause even bigger problems. Okay, so I'll come on to this inshallah and speak more about it later in the podcast. So an important thing for you to take note of is, even if you are an empathic person and you're married to an empathic person, it doesn't mean that you won't ever have narcissistic children. So you've done your part, which is to give your children the best start in life by ensuring that they grow up in a loving household. However, sometimes, even if you are the best parents, you can still end up with at least one narcissistic child. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes they are influenced by other narcissists around them in their life. So it could be your brother, right? Their uncle, their cousins, their auntie. It could be people at school. It could be teachers. It could be people whom they are watching in cartoons. It could be anyone, right? Anyone whom they know. It could be a neighbor. And they start to become influenced by this person's narcissistic character. So if that happens, just know that this was your trial in life, right? It's your test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same way many prophets, alayhim as-salam, were, tested with their rebellious children. Okay, like Nuh alayhi salam. He was tested with his son. And, you can't get better than a prophet as a parent, right? So it's just comfort from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He lets us know in the Quran that even prophets struggled with their own children. It's just to give you a heads up that you can do the best job in the world of parenting your children, but you might have that one child who will come out completely different and also make your life difficult, okay, as a result of the influences that they have been under from other people who are problematic. And there'll be a reason why these people, these children, or these teenagers are influenced easily by narcissistic people. And sometimes it's because they lack confidence. So when they see their narcissistic uncle very confident and very bold in how he speaks and all of that, they might take interest in how he presents himself, and they try to copy that behaviour because they might be bullied at school, or they may not be so confident around people in school or college, and it's just easier for them to copy the behaviour of someone whom they admire in their confidence. Okay, so children and teenagers will often look at people who have what they lack. So if they feel they lack confidence, they might be inspired by a narcissist who is overly confident in how they present themselves. And if they have trouble in asking for what they need and what they want, they might take, again, inspiration from a narcissist who feels very entitled to everything. And they manage to get everything very easily from people because they have this air of haughtiness, right? The arrogance. And it just makes people give them what they want. So again, someone who is raised in an empathic household might look at the way they were raised and think, I haven't really got far with the way that I am. I'm too nice, I'm too kind. I was always raised to be considerate of everybody and, have good manners. But actually, it's the narcissists who get what they want in life. I want to be like them. So, there's a reason why children and teenagers start to copy the behaviour of narcissists. And like I said, always look at what they feel they're lacking, because unfortunately they latch on to the wrong role models for what they want. Okay, so they don't learn about, the healthy way of asking for what you want and what you need, and they don't ask about the correct way of presenting themselves as confident people so they don't come across as arrogant or grandiose. So again, it's a learning journey that they go on even as teenagers, but you have to understand that it's not because you did a bad job at parenting. A lot of parents say to me, their dad is great, I'm great, we raised them in an Islamic environment, we did everything that we could, but there's that one daughter or there's that one son who's just a complete nightmare. I don't know how they turned out like that. Their siblings are completely different. It's just that one child who's making life so difficult. And I always say to them, who are they around and who are they copying? And what is it that your children are lacking and they don't know because they haven't sat down to communicate with their children to find out what it is that they are insecure in? Okay, when you find out what your children's insecurities are, and I'm talking about, between the ages of 10 and 15, then you will be able to guide them towards a more healthy role model for what it is that they want to learn more about. Okay, so that's how you nip it in the bud from a very young age so that they don't become very problematic teenagers. Now, teenagers become problematic for a variety of different reasons, and scientists, they say, it's because of hormones. Hormones definitely play a big part, but it's not everything. Okay, so when someone goes to a doctor and they say, my teenager is stroppy all the time, they're rude, they're arrogant, they don't listen, they slam doors, they, smash belongings, they scream, they shout. Doctors might put it down to, it's just teenage hormones, right? You're going through the teenage phase of them being in this kind of mood. It's not that. Okay, this is only a small part of it. The hormonal changes can influence the way someone responds emotionally. Okay, so like women when they're pregnant or on their menstrual cycle, you might find that they cry more than they normally do, or they get upset more than they normally do. They might lash out, they might get, more aggressive than usual. When they're irritated, it can be put down to hormonal imbalance. The same thing happens with teenagers, where they're navigating all of these changes that are happening in their bodies, and they are reacting to all of these changes in different ways. So the biological aspect of things is definitely important for you to be aware of and to take into consideration, because remember, when boys start having wet dreams and girls start their menstrual cycle, they can harbour feelings of shame and they don't know who to talk to about it, and that shame can manifest in their behaviour as them being aggressive, lashing out, being quiet, being stroppy, being moody, and all sorts. Okay, so again, it just comes down to communication. You need to sit with your children and you need to talk to them about the changes that they will go through in puberty, and for them to know it's normal and for them to know that you're there to support them with it. Because I know in many Muslim families, unfortunately, this is something they don't speak about with their children because it's seen as something embarrassing. It's seen as something to be brushed under the carpet. And then what happens is that they start getting wrong information from their friends at school, or they get wrong information from other people. So it's really important that they understand that you know what they're going through, and that you have a comfortable enough relationship for them to be able to come to you and speak to you about their personal matters and problems. So I've come across some, single fathers who are empaths, and wallahi, they do such an amazing job at teaching their young girls how to protect themselves, how to use pads, how to do all of those things, because they don't have female relatives. They have no caring sisters, and the ex-wife is on another planet. There are some narcissistic women who really don't care about their daughters. All they care about is having a good time, traveling with their friends, and they're not really attentive to the needs of their daughters. So when these men have their daughters, they realise that, the girls have just started their menstrual cycles and they don't know what they're doing. They have no idea what's going on, but they're comfortable enough to go and tell their fathers that this is what's happened and I don't know what to do. So he will go out and he'll buy them the pads and teach them about it. So they don't feel embarrassed and they don't feel ashamed and they don't feel abnormal. They're able to talk to their father about these things, and this is incredibly important. Incredibly important. Now, the majority of men won't do this because they don't have that level of empathy to be able to connect with their daughters on that kind of emotional level. And this is why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, whoever has 3 daughters and he cares for them, he is merciful to them, and he clothes them, then paradise is certainly required for him. So one of the Sahaba said, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, what if he only has 2 daughters?" And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, even if he has 2 daughters, the same applies to him. And then some people said that if there was another Sahabi who asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about having just 1 daughter, then he would have said even 1. Okay, so this is in Musnad Ahmad. So it's very important for fathers to have this type of relationship with their daughters, because this is the type of relationship that will allow him to go to Jannah, and possibly without any accounting. Okay, because it requires a level of empathy from a man and a high level of nafs for him to be able to connect with young girls on that kind of level. Okay, so it's not for everyone. And especially in our Muslim culture, a lot of men will refuse to have this kind of relationship with their daughters, and they always push these matters onto, the mother or his sisters, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when a man is a single father, this is the level of empathy he needs to tap into in order for him to attain the rewards of being a good parent to a teenager. Now, when it's the other way around, it's harder, because when you're a single mother and you've got a teenage boy who is experiencing wet dreams, it can be very difficult to speak to him about this, and especially if he is the one who's very embarrassed about it. So in this scenario, it's best that he talks to a man, then him speak to his mother about it, so that the relationship doesn't become awkward. So you can see here that the father is actually the best person to speak to when it comes to a boy going through puberty and also a girl going through puberty, because when she informs her father of what she's going through and she has that trust with him, she can tell him about boys in school. She can tell him about anything that goes wrong, if anyone approaches her in a wrong way, if anyone tries to touch her sexually at school or in someone's house, for example, she's able to go and speak to her father about it. Okay, so it's really important that the father is someone whom both girls and boys can talk to about puberty. Now, obviously, it's very important for a mother to be on top of these matters with their daughters, but this is the wisdom behind the Islamic ruling of girls from the age of 7 going to live with their fathers should a divorce happen. So a father is more entitled to the child custody of his daughter at that age than the mother, because once she reaches that age, she now needs the protection of her father, okay, because she's now sexually mature, and the father needs to be aware of what's going on in her life to protect her from immature adolescents and predatory men. However, a boy from the age of 7 can choose whether he wants to live with his mother or live with his father should a divorce happen. And the reason for that is because he may be the only mahram left for his mother. So she might be more entitled to keep him with her for that reason. And it's a strong Islamic reason, because her husband is no longer her mahram. And she may not have a father, and she may not have brothers or uncles. So Islamic law has left it open for the boys, because it could be in favour of the mother should she need her son with her. So what we understand from this ruling is that if a divorce were to happen, the father is actually fully responsible for children who reach the age of puberty onwards. Okay, it's not the mother who shoulders the responsibility, it's the father and his family. But these days I am seeing that a lot of women are choosing to carry the burden of raising teenagers alone, and it's crippling them. It's absolutely exhausting them, because they've chosen to take on a responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given to them. Allah gave it to the men. Right? They are responsible for their adolescent children, and to instill strong morality in them so that they don't answer back, so that they don't become aggressive, they don't become abusive. Right? When the presence of the father is taken away, and that could be because he's walked out, because she doesn't want him having access to the children, whatever the reason might be, when the father's presence is taken away, it becomes an incredible burden on a woman to raise teenagers alone. Because Islamically, you're supposed to be in your feminine element and maternal energy. So when you take on the role of the father and you become the one who disciplines them, shouts at them, screams at them, you exit the feminine energy and you take on masculine energy, and your children are now deprived of a mother. Okay? And this is another huge problem. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the father shoulders the responsibility of adolescence, it's so that the mother can maintain her maternal role in the family. And we know how important this is because if you've listened to my previous podcast and read my book and the works of many other psychologists and psychotherapists, you'll understand that many people who develop NPD and codependency, they developed it as a result of them not having a loving and nurturing mother during their childhood, because either the mother took on the masculine role of the father or she was too stressed to be able to do it. Okay, so Islam wants to preserve this maternal energy in women by allocating the responsibility of adolescence to the father and their family. Okay, so you get to have that space to be able to be the softer side to your children, right, to your teenagers. But unfortunately, as a result of many men not shouldering all their responsibilities and being absent, or women insisting that they keep the teenagers, it's caused a massive imbalance in how teenagers are raised in a healthy way, because they don't have a healthy mother and they also don't have a healthy father. And this is one of the core reasons why they become so turbulent in their behaviour when they hit the age of puberty. And so they lash out at both parents because they're angry at both parents. They can't find the right role model in their father, right? That paternal energy, that masculine energy, it's not there because they feel like the father doesn't care much about them. And at the same time, they're angry with their mothers because their mothers are always shouting and screaming and cursing and saying that I'm going to pray and make dua against you, and constantly say, oh, I wish I never had kids and I hate your father and your father did this to me and he did that to me. You know, when teenagers have to constantly hear this, it adds to the hormonal imbalance that they're already experiencing with the changes in their body, and it just makes them go into a complete rage, right? They take it out on you as the parent. It's going to happen because, you know, one of the best things that a man can ever do for his family is to treat the mother well. So when children see how well their mother is treated by the father, it gives them a sense of peace and stability. But when they see that the father is abusive and the mother is all over the place and she's toxic, or she's an enabler, or she's too weak, she can't fight for their rights because she's terrified of their dad, when they see this, they lash out. Okay, because they're still trying to make sense of everything. They are trying to understand why everything is the way it is, because they don't understand adult relationships yet. They don't know anything about disorders. They are interpreting everything that they're seeing from their own teenage lens. And then they go and find outlets for it later. Okay, they go and find something to go and make them feel better. Now it's at this exact point in a teenager's life when they meet their qareen. Okay, that's when the qareen comes into play. He's like, you know, he's dusting himself off. He's like, it's showtime. It's my time to shine now. For 13, 14 years I've been sleeping. I've just been wasting time. I've been kicking rocks because these children weren't accountable for anything. Right, I've just been aggravating their parents, you know, doing things here and there to make the children naughty, but it's boring. It's not enough for me. Now I've been given the task of corrupting this person and giving this person mental health issues because I'm accountable now to Iblis. Okay, I have to give a record now to Iblis. Iblis has now put him on a timer. He's on a timer. He's got to clock in and clock out every day. And they also have records that they need to present. And if they haven't done enough, they get punished. Okay? The soldiers of Iblis will get punished if they do not do enough to corrupt mankind. Okay? The same way our record goes up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day. Remember I told you the angels will take them up at Fajr and Asr. The Qareen and all jinn devils have their time as well during the day when they submit their records to Iblis. And I've given this evidence before, but I'll give it again. Jabir radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Verily, Iblis places his throne over the water and sends out his soldiers. The closest to him in rank are the greatest at causing tribulations. One of them says, I have done this and this and this. And Iblis says, you have done nothing. This is minor, petty. And then another one says, I did not leave this man alone until I separated him from his wife. And Iblis embraces him and rewards him and says to him, you have done very well." Okay, this is in Sahih Muslim. So they present their records every day. And that's why it's jihad al-nafs, to be battling with your nafs every day against the whispers of your evil qareen. Okay, that's why it's a daily thing. It's a daily struggle that you will have until the day you die. Okay, your qareen is with you from the moment you're born until the day you die. It's a daily battle you will have to face. And this starts as soon as someone reaches the age of puberty. Okay, so the qareen here will take advantage of the fact that a teenager is already in distress, is already depressed, is already so upset at their situation, okay, with the family. They feel lost, they feel misguided, they feel like they have parents who don't care about them, they feel they don't fit in where they are, they don't fit in their school, or they could be bullied, okay, or they've just experienced a divorce at home between their parents, or they've experienced some sort of abuse. It could be many things. But the qareen here will latch on to this. And the whispers that teenagers will receive from this evil qareen will fuel everything they're already feeling. Okay, so you will always see them exaggerating in their anger and exaggerating in their rudeness, okay, and in their reactions. You think that was a bit of an exaggerated reaction. You didn't need to be that rude. You didn't need to kick a hole in the door and smash the plates and scream at me and call me an effing blinding this and that. You didn't need to do that. So for many parents, it becomes quite scary to see their children turn into rageful monsters in one day and one night. By the way, this will happen in one day and one night, because as soon as that qareen wakes up and realizes it's showtime, that's it. In one day and one night, your teenagers will change, okay? And they will start having very heavy, intrusive thoughts. And these intrusive thoughts make them overthink and want to be alone, because they're trying to process all of these thoughts that keep coming into their minds. They want to just shut themselves off in their rooms and just focus on what's being said to them, okay? And this is where they start getting tempted into doing wrong things. And that's why so many teenagers experiment with so many things, okay? Smoking, drinking, partying, drugs, you name it, they do it. Because the qareen is now telling them, why don't you try this? It will make you feel better. Why don't you do this? It will make you forget about the pain that you're feeling at home, the abuse that you're experiencing at home. It will make you feel, that you're a somebody. It will make you feel good. So shayateen al-ins and shayateen al-jinn, they start working together to get a very vulnerable teenager who is already distressed into a problematic situation of becoming addicted to something as an escape from their problems. And so you'll find many teenagers start developing OCD, OCD comes from the qareen, intrusive thoughts, because I want you to just put yourselves in the shoes of the qareen for a minute. He or she has now got all this power over this human being, okay? And they want to milk it. And they want to have as much fun as possible. So they already know that a teenager who is already troubled is an easy project to corrupt, okay? And that's how the traits of codependency and toxic codependency start coming about. And teenagers who already have narcissistic traits because they've copied the traits of people whom they've seen in their lives and been around, the qareen is fueling those traits now. He's working with those traits. So he's like, well, this is easy. I can easily corrupt this teenager. I can easily turn them into a narcissist, easily turn this person into a heavy codependent who will serve the narcissist, okay? So the qareen of the codependent is training the codependent teenager to grow up into an adult that serves the narc. Okay, that's why codependents enable the behaviour of narcissists. So that's the mission of the codependent qareen. Now, the mission of the narcissistic qareen is to fuel the traits of NPD, okay? And it escalates from the age of puberty. So these are the two main missions qareens have with adolescents: to make them heavy codependents who are the enablers, and to make people narcissistic because they become the abusers. And both of them become entangled in a toxic cycle with each other. And if they become entangled for life with each other, then there's no hope of this world getting better, right? This world will just get worse and worse and worse. Societies will get worse because marriages will keep falling apart because narcissists will marry codependents. And when narcissists marry codependents, the environment they raise their children in will always be toxic. So they work on children who have codependent tendencies and narcissistic tendencies. Now, the teenagers who have empathic tendencies are the ones that qareens struggle with. And I'll come on to the empaths in a minute. But the qareen will have a lot of fun with this. Okay, he's now exercising his power and his authority. He wants to see how far he can take this and how much fun he can have with it. Now, when I say he, they can be she as well. So your qareen can be male or female. So in this situation, I want you to understand something, that the fun part of it is when the qareen gives someone OCD. And the reason why it's funny for them, for someone to have OCD, is because they have messed with the human intellect, right? Because they're like, well, if this is the most important part of you as the human being, your intellect, then I'm going to corrupt you in your mind because Iblis has taught me how to do that. So if I take away your ability to think rationally, then it will just be entertainment for me. So, for example, you find some people who have OCD with the light switch. They have to switch it on and off 30 times before they leave a room. The qareen finds that hilarious. Or when you have to wash your hands 20 times before you leave the bathroom. The qareen finds that hilarious because it's not a logical thing to do. So when the qareen puts you in a situation where you're not thinking logically about something, he's winning or she's winning, you see. So this is their entertainment when they find that you're terrified of, minor things that they do to your mind and your psyche to train you into believing that this is something to be feared, this is something to be avoided. They just have fun with it. Now, the more serious things that they do are to mess with your head and give you long-term PTSD because they are constantly reminding you of your trauma. Everything you've been through as a child and as a teenager in your home, in your school. Like I said, you could have been abused sexually, physically, emotionally, verbally, religiously, whatever. The qareen will never let you forget that. And that's why teenagers are very angry. And they will treat their parents like they hate them. Especially the single mother. Okay, so if you've got teenage children and you're a single mother, you will notice that the one who is more toxic, codependent, or narcissistic treats you like they hate you, it's because their qareen wants them to hate you. And it keeps feeding them so many thoughts about what a toxic mother you are, how you're not loving, how you don't care about them, how you don't love them, and that the breaking of the family was all your fault. And it just goes on and on and on. And that's why you always feel like, wow, my kids hate me. What is it that they have towards me? What have I done? What have I done to you to make you hate me and treat me this badly? I've just finished dealing with your abusive father, and I couldn't believe that I managed to get out of that toxic relationship and get a divorce. And now I've got to deal with you. And I have to now be abused by you. So it can become a completely new trauma for the mother, sometimes for the father as well, if it's the other way around, to be dealing with a toxic teenager after they've just gone through the exhausting ordeal of dealing with the parent, dealing with the husband or wife who made their life a living hell. So now it's like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? I've just finished from one narcopath and now I've got another one to deal with. And that's when you get iman issues. And your qareen wants you now to believe that Allah hates you, that Allah's punishing you. Ya Allah, why is there no mercy? Why is there no rest? Why is there no peace? Why can I never have any peace? Why am I always stuck in this cycle with abusive people, including my own children? The reason why is because you've taken on a responsibility that Allah hasn't asked you to take on when it comes to women. And when it comes to men, it's because you are not aware of what it is that they're going through in their minds. So again, because of a lack of communication, you don't understand about the qareen, you don't understand about these spiritual issues that teenagers go through. You now take it personally. And when you take it personally, everything blows up 10 times worse in the home. It becomes very toxic. It becomes very abusive. And there just seems no end to all of this. You're like, I just want peace. I just want to die because I can't be dealing with all these narcissists anymore. I just want khalas. I just want out of this situation. But because you feel obligated to take care of your kids, you feel like khalas, I have to surrender to this trial that Allah's given me. Why is Allah giving it to me? I'm angry with Allah because He's given it to me. So many people do surrender to it, but they have iman issues at the same time. So I'm explaining why all of this is happening so that inshallah you can resolve your iman issues. Because it's got nothing to do with that. It's because these teenagers harbour a lot of resentment, a lot of anger towards their own situation and the traumas they never addressed and spoke about, and they didn't get therapy for, and they couldn't express their feelings about these traumas and what they went through, that the qareen has now taken advantage of the vulnerable situation of these teenagers and fanned the flames that are already there. Now when it comes to empathic teenagers, because they're more spiritual, now we're talking about Muslim families, if the empath is, a daughter or a son who prays, they read Quran, they're good with their parents, they're very empathic and compassionate with their parents, the qareen can only go so far with this teenager. And that's why you'll find that you might have one teenager who's so good and the other is the polar opposite. They were raised in the same house or under the same roof, but they're completely different from each other. The empath who has protected themselves and who is closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be protected from their qareen. Especially if they're in the habit of reading their adhkar and their moral compass is stronger, then the qareen will be tied somewhat. Their hands will be tied, they will struggle, they will try to do things here and there. You'll find that the empathic teenager will sometimes lash out, they'll have their mood swings here and there. When they manage to let the qareen slip out and take control, you'll have that, right? Everyone's going to have their qareen slip out now and again of, from the shackles and take some control. But the empathic child knows that there's something not right with their behaviour when they do that. And if they do treat their parents in a bad way, or they swear, or they act out of character, they immediately feel bad about it. However, a teenager whom is controlled by their qareen, they won't have that remorse. they would just get worse and worse and worse, because firstly, they don't understand that this is a nafs problem, that they actually have the ability to control their nafs and how much they are influenced by the qareen. And secondly, because it works for them, because their behaviour is now intimidating the weaker parent and they're getting away with what they want. Okay, so they're now learning manipulation, they're learning how to gaslight, they're learning how to lie and become pathological liars. They're learning so many things, and this is all taught by whom? The evil jinn. Because these are the traits of the evil jinn. And so the waswas, the waswas that they get, it just gives them these ideas. Why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And that's why people get strange, intrusive thoughts. Like, people who are psychopaths, they get thoughts about murder. They get thoughts about rape. And it's not something that they would have thought of, but these are intrusive thoughts. And you find this a lot in movies as well. If you look at movies about criminals, they will always tell you, I get these thoughts where, something is telling me to go murder that person or rape that person or attack that person. It's the evil qareen that tells them to do this. Okay, so when the teenager whom you raised or the child you raised starts to act like a completely different person, like they've come from a completely different family, it means, unfortunately, they are completely controlled by their qareen, and the only way around it is to teach them how to read their adhkar and to have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if they are so controlled by their qareen, they won't want to do that. It will become an absolute struggle to get them to pray, to get them to do wudu, to get them to even be hygienic. One of the signs that they are controlled by their qareen is that boys in particular are extremely unhygienic. Their rooms are disgusting. They smell really bad. And they will have mouldy cups of tea in their rooms. They'll have mouldy leftover food. And their bed sheets will be dirty. They'll be stained. It's just really bad. It's a really bad situation. But that's how you know they've got qareen possession. Okay, it's a major giveaway when a teenager is unhygienic in their bedroom and also with their own appearance and their own hygiene. Okay, so they won't use deodorant, they won't shower, their hair will be greasy, they won't even brush their teeth. You have to keep telling them to go and brush their teeth like they're 3. And like I said, they won't pray. They're not going to do these things, or they'll pretend to do them. They'll be like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll go pray. They'll slam the door and then they'll pretend to pray, and then they'll come out like 2 minutes later and you'll say, did you pray? They'll be like, yeah, I prayed. I did this and I did that. They won't fast Ramadan. They'll cheat during Ramadan. Fortunately, like I said, this is qareen possession, okay? And this is where PTSD starts from, and this is where MPD grows from. And this is how they become very rebellious and very narcissistic, because they have no idea. No one's taught them how to maintain control over their nafs and their waswas, okay? They don't know how to do it. They have no idea what it is. They don't even know where these intrusive thoughts are coming from. They think it's who they are. They think they're bad people, okay? And at the same time, they have never processed their traumas. There are lots of things that many teenagers bottle up that they aren't able to speak about. And the more they bottle up these feelings and experiences, the more they carry them into adulthood with them. And then that becomes their baggage, right? Their emotional and psychological baggage that they throw into every relationship they get into. Okay, so like young men who never had a loving, nurturing, kind, sweet mother to, comfort them when they were young, will lash out at women. They don't like women because they believe that women are cold-hearted. Women are, they're not loving, and that those sweet women don't exist. Those mothers that I used to see in cartoons and Disney films, and, they don't exist. It's just a fantasy. There aren't any women like that. Or the other type of narcissist who grows up to be a man-child will look for the mother he never had. So this idea of what a mother should be and how maternal she should be and how sweet and loving, caring, kind, he's got this idea of what a mother should be like. He looks for that in other women. And this is done on a subconscious level. So he will be gravitating towards women who have maternal energy. Okay, so this will be the subject of my next podcast, inshallah, okay, about the man-child. So they look for the mother they never had, and when that happens, they're always still in child mode. You see, they want to relive the childhood they never had, and this is how the qareen keeps them in this mode, in this childlike mode. So it's PTSD, right? It's a trauma that they felt of, being deprived of a loving mother, and the qareen will stretch this out for as long as possible. Okay, even until a man's in his 50s and 60s and 70s, he will still want to be babied by a woman because he's still looking for mum. So when a teenager is unable to express this in a healthy way and explain to somebody that this is what I feel like I'm missing in my life, then they don't get the chance for any help to come their way. So maybe there's someone else in the family who has maternal energy whom they can get that from. Because if they can get it from somewhere else, it's still better than not having it at all. Because it will enable them when they're older to look for a wife rather than a mother. Okay? So as long as they stay stuck in childlike mode because they feel like I want to have what I feel like I missed out on, then you will never find a husband in that man. You'll always find a child in that man. So this is what happens with the man-child at the time of adolescence, and what happens with the more malignant types of narcissists from the age of adolescence. And the more malignant types are the ones who are just vile to be around. There are some teenagers who are absolutely horrific to be around. Like, parents will be scared being around these adolescents because they're so aggressive. So these are the two types of narcissists that qareens like to work on, plus the codependent and the toxic codependent. There's another podcast, inshallah, coming about them, but they're very similar to narcissists, okay? They just have more empathy than them, but they use their empathy to manipulate other people. So it's an interesting subject, inshallah, for another day. But this is what happens. Okay, this is what happens with the qareen. The journey of PTSD starts from here. So even if a teenager has an absent father, the qareen will always tell them, you are nothing because you have no father. You are unloved. You are unwanted. You are not worthy because your father abandoned you or your mother abandoned you. People are better than you because they have a healthy family, because they've got a present father, and this and that and this and that. So these are the thoughts that teenagers always have, and that's why they react and behave in such a vile way that is unexplainable to you. Okay, they've got this creature constantly in their ear telling them about this. So you might have very short periods where they come back to who they are and they're nice and they're respectful, but it doesn't last very long. Okay, that's how you know they're controlled by their qareen. And like I said, many parents don't even know how to deal with this because they don't know it's a qareen problem. They don't know it's a nafs problem. Okay, as soon as you know, you can start helping your teenagers, inshallah. So what will usually happen, like I said, the qareen will offer an escape from all of these problems, okay, all of these traumas, and you will find that the teenagers who are controlled by their qareen will have a very deep interest in a number of things that I'm going to list for you now. If you find that your teenagers are interested in these things, or maybe you were when you were a teenager, inshallah, it will explain a lot of things for you and why you are the way you are today, okay? So I'm going to list you 10 things that teenagers get involved in, and they're in no particular order. So some might be prioritized more than others, but this is just to give you a general understanding of the escape the qareen gives the teenager for all of these bottled up traumas and frustrations and anger. Okay, so the first one would be a deep interest in horror movies. Okay, so it's not normal for someone to love horror movies so much, especially when they're about the jinn, ghosts, zombies, things like that, right? The spiritual world. If you find them finding comfort in watching horror movies and really enjoying them, this is a huge problem. The second thing would be listening to bad music regularly. Okay, so they have a deep interest in music and rap that has explicit lyrics, filthy lyrics. They love it. They just have no sense of shame when they listen to it. They don't care who hears it. They just enjoy it. Okay, when you see teenagers really enjoy this type of music, it's a problem. Because again, it's not normal to be constantly listening to lyrics about abuse and rape and sexual activity and drugs and alcohol and murder and misogyny and all that kind of stuff, right? If you're constantly listening to that, you're going to become that. You're going to become what you listen to. And, you know, this is something that we weren't aware of when we were younger. I was born in the 80s and, you know, like we used to listen to R&B, not realizing how filthy some of the lyrics were because we were so innocent back then. But now teenagers are very aware of what's being said in lyrics. And they have no shame in listening to things like that, right? So I feel like the generations are changing in regards to the level of shame people have. So if you find that your teenagers have no problem with you knowing what they listen to, this is a problem, okay? It's an indication of qareen possession. Now, the third thing would be an addiction to problematic games, right? Video games. So again, some of them are very violent. If you find that there are teenagers who have this deep interest in, you know, fighting games and shooting people and murder and, you know, games like Fortnite. I'm seeing kids as young as 10 play Fortnite. And it horrifies me that they're exposed to this and they're seeing it as something normal. Like, yeah, let's just kill people. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's blow up that building and let's stab this person and shoot that person. It's horrible. But again, it's qareen possession to have young adults be exposed to this type of aggression and this type of entertainment. Okay, and a lot of parents say to me, you know, we try to stop our children from playing video games, but they play them when they go to their cousin's house. They play them when they go to see their friends, and there's no stopping it, right? And then they have tantrums because all their friends have a PS5 or a Nintendo, and you know they can't get to play these games like Fortnite and all of that. And then it just causes the parents to just give in because they just can't deal with the rages anymore. They can't deal with the stress of having to deal with teenagers who are clearly possessed by their qareen. Okay, so an addiction to video games comes from the qareen because they can spend like 9 or 10 hours playing that all day. And of course that distracts them from salah, distracts them from, you know, thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their connection with Him, nature, going out, exercising, being healthy. It distracts them from everything good. So if you give every teenager a PS5, they'll never leave their rooms. And that's what qareen wants. He wants them to be so crippled in their intelligence and their psyche that they've got nothing going on for them in their lives apart from playing video games. There's no ambition. There's no thinking, you know, about the future. There's no nurturing their talents and skills. No, there's none of that. There's no time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. None of that. No time for learning new things, respecting the parents, spending time with family. None of that. They just want to play video games. Okay? I'm telling you now, this isn't normal. And this takes me on to them having bad friends. Okay? Bad friends who are also controlled by their qareen. So these types of teenagers will gravitate towards the same kind of people because they feel comfortable with other teenagers who can relate to them. So they tend to all swim in the same swamp and fuel each other's PTSD, fuel each other's problems, fuel each other's spiritual issues. Okay, because they keep encouraging each other to advance in what they're doing. So a friend, for example, might introduce Red Bull to your teenage son, and the next time it will be an upgrade to a beer, and that will upgrade to a vodka, okay, and so on and so forth. Or a friend might introduce him to like a porn magazine or something like that, right? So bad friends influence each other because all their qareens are working together, and the mission is to corrupt all of these young boys and all of these young girls so that they have no future and that they're stuck in PTSD so they never heal from their traumas. Okay? And like I said, bad friends can also offer, a cigarette, and then that cigarette turns into a spliff of weed, and then that turns into cocaine and heroin and so on and so forth, right? It starts from something. It always starts from something. If your teenager starts smoking, I guarantee you, eventually they'll start smoking weed, and then they'll start trying other things out as well, because now they've got an interest in what they're smoking. And they want to try the things, and they're enjoying feeling high, and they want to experience, other sensations and what it feels like to get high off other drugs. They will be tempted into these things because their qareens are working together. And they like doing this in their room as well. Look, I'll tell you something. The jinn, because they're created from a smokeless fire, they will be attracted to everyone who smokes. So even if it's shisha, they will be attracted. You will always have the jinn around people who smoke, because the jinn love the smell of smoke. It's what they're created from, so they like it. They like being in that environment. So when you have loads of people smoking together, I can promise you, there are hundreds of jinn in that place. Hundreds. That's why it's good to avoid shisha bars, shisha cafes, places where people are smoking a lot, because you will find so many jinn there. And I want to give you another example as well for humans. Have you ever noticed that you love the smell of the earth when it rains? Okay, because it's clay and water mixed together. And that's what you're created from. So you have a craving for it. There is this need, right? This feeling that you just want to inhale that smell completely because it's so good. It's because that's what you're created from. It's clay and water. So it's the same for the jinn. They love smoke. The same way you love that earthy smell when it rains, and you smell it coming off the pavement and coming off the grass, or if you're walking in nature, you smell it after it rains. It's just such a wonderful smell, and it's comforting, and that's the reason behind it. Okay, that's the reason why so many people love that smell, if not all people. And this is why a lot of scholars, they say, don't socialize with people who smoke. Don't be around people who smoke. Don't go to these places where people smoke, because of the spiritual problems you can actually get from being in these environments, okay? So you'll find that teenagers have this obsession with going to these places. They have to go and meet all their friends in the shisha cafe, in the shisha bar, here and there. No matter what you tell them, they just have to go and meet them there. They won't meet them anywhere else. It just has to be in the shisha bar. Okay, again, it's their qareen directing them towards a place that is not spiritually good for them. Now, number 5 is walking in the dark. Now, this is particularly bad for girls. Okay, if you are walking in the dark, you are susceptible to being a victim of the jinn. Okay, because it's their time. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if you could see what I see after Maghrib, none of you would leave the house. So young teenagers who are already distressed, they're already developing MPD, they are already traumatized, and they're already full of resentment and anger. When they go out alone in the dark, walking in the streets, they're a prime target for evil spirits. Okay, so your qareen is with you. It's already bad enough that your qareen is with you, but you're going to attract other evil spirits as well that roam around in the dark when you are in such a low vibration. Okay, that's why you should never walk when you're upset at night. Never cry walking at night. Never go out in anger, because this is where you can actually attract evil jinn towards you, because you've now met them at their vibration level. The vibration level that you have to be at to attract the jinn has to be where you are angry, super upset, depressed, frustrated, irritable. That's when you're at a low vibration. So they catch you when you're in those moods. Okay? So never go out in a bad mood in the dark. And try not to let your daughters in particular go out in the dark at night when they're upset, when they're crying, when they're angry, because that's what's going to happen, unfortunately. You will get evil spirits latch onto them. Now, the 6th thing would be watching pornography. Okay? So this is the stage where many teenagers start to develop their sexual orientation. So if they start watching gay porn, for example, if they've got a curiosity in watching certain types of pornography, then this can be the start of عاشق جن possession. Okay, this is where they start to develop gay tendencies. They might develop lesbian tendencies from this age, and they might even develop an addiction to pornography as an outlet for their stress. So this is something that, again, the qareen encourages them to do, bad friends encourage them to do, and they all work together to make sure that this teenager becomes addicted to pornography and finds relief in pornography. And that leads to point number 7, which is early sexual activity. So now they start engaging in self-pleasure, right? They do a lot of it because they're watching porn, or they start to experiment with or develop sexual relationships with other adolescents, right, and teenagers. That's why so many teenage girls in the West get pregnant at 15 and 16, because they're all experimenting with each other. They watch pornography and then they go and experiment on each other. Again, عاشق جن possession. The qareen is working, their qareens are working. Some of them have عاشق جن possession as well. It's a complete mess that they become entangled in. But this is how they start to attract many different evil spirits on top of the qareen who already controls them. Okay, so horror movies, bad music, addictions to pornography and like aggressive video games, all of that attract the عاشق جن. Okay, because the عاشق جن, they find it very easy to corrupt people who already have an addiction. So once they have an addiction, it becomes very easy for the عاشق جن to take over. All right, and then when the عاشق جن takes over, they can now engage sexually with them in their dreams. So wet dreams become now more frequent. Okay, some people, like I said in my previous podcast, they will orgasm during dreams because the عاشق جن is engaging with them. Now, it's not something you're accountable for because it's a dream, but you will wake up and you would have released fluid and everything because the عاشق جن has engaged in this with you, and it's become a physical release now. Okay, this is what happens when you engage in too much self-pleasure and you watch too much porn or watch any porn. The عاشق جن starts to engage with you sexually, even if it's just through your psyche. You will now be someone who thinks about sex all the time. Okay, that's why you get loads of teenage boys who are just obsessed about sex. That's all they can think about. And it's all they want to look at. And it's all they want to, be involved in and experiment with. All they think about is girls. This obsession with girls during the teenage years, it's not normal for them to be that obsessed. Yes, it's, natural for adolescent boys to be curious about girls and vice versa. That's completely normal and natural. But to have an obsession with sex as a teenager and to, be obsessed about pornography and, experimenting and doing this and doing that and excessively engaging in self-pleasure, that will put you in a position where you become abnormal and you develop a sex addiction that can drag into adulthood. And that's what your qareen wants to make sure of. He wants to make sure that you have a sex addiction so you can never commit to anyone. So you engage in so much zina that the thought of marriage is horrifying to you. The thought of being with one woman or one man is horrifying for you. They want you to do that. So when you get used to self-pleasure or you get used to experimenting sexually with other people, you're going to have commitment problems when you're older. You're not going to be able to settle down. You're not going to be able to find sexual satisfaction in just one person. And your qareen has already ruined your life. Okay? It's already ruined your life and having a stable family and a happy marriage because of this. This is where it all starts. All of it starts from here. And then, it just develops into so many other problems. So not only are you dealing with MPD or heavy codependency, you're also now dealing with social problems, personal problems, relationship problems. You're dealing with the inability to commit. You're dealing now with so many health issues, physically, mentally, spiritually. It's endless. That's why narcissists find it very difficult to change and to get the help they need and to heal, because it's just become an accumulation of too many issues by the time they reach like mid-adulthood. It's just too much. Like when they reach their 30s, it's too much. When they reach their 40s and 50s, it's almost, I give up. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to try go in there, because it means that I have to go back to my childhood traumas and sort them out and actually address them and process them. And a lot of people just don't want to go there in their 40s and 50s and 60s. They just can't do it. So the majority of narcissists, unfortunately, won't change. And it all starts from here. So, you've got to be careful. You've got to really keep an eye on your teenagers, because if they are interested in all of these things, I'm telling you, you've got a problem on your hands. And then another thing that you should try and avoid at night is mirrors, because the jinn love shiny things. Okay, so if you've got a mirror in your room, try and cover it at night if you can, especially if you see it when you get up to go and pray or get a glass of water. Try and remove large mirrors from the rooms of your teenagers. And if you have spiritual problems, one of the things you can do to actually improve your situation is to cover any mirrors in your room at night. Okay, because like I said, they love shiny objects. They love keys and knives and, anything that reflects light. So if it's difficult for you to do that, like covering the mirrors at night, then switch the light on when you go to pray or when you go to use the bathroom or go and get a drink of water. Okay, just don't walk around in the dark with mirrors around. Just try your best to just switch the light on. I know it's annoying, you'll probably lose your sleep, but it's actually better for you if you have spiritual problems to do that. And then the last point will be the parties they go to, right? Teenagers will love going to parties where there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot going on, and just be careful of their social environments when they are, entertaining themselves. So even if it's like music concerts and they're really dressing up and they're going with friends to these concerts where the lyrics are filthy, they're disgusting, and you notice that your daughters are starting to really dress up, maybe provocatively, this is all again from the Ashaq Jinn. If you have teenage daughters who insist on wearing so much makeup and not dressing appropriately, they might have Ashaq Jinn possession. Okay, especially if they are inviting, sexual attention towards themselves. If they are insisting on that, then unfortunately, most likely they have that. And they will absolutely love going to parties. Okay, I'm talking about now 14 to 18. You will find them having a deep interest in socializing with the wrong crowds and going to places that are not good for them. So when teenagers hang out with people who are already possessed by the Ashaq Jinn, the Jinn can actually jump ship. So they can jump in between bodies. And sometimes this Jinn or another type of Jinn will jump from the parent to the child. So if the parent is a malignant narcissist, for example, you might find that one of your children is acting exactly like their dad, like their abusive dad, or exactly like their abusive mom. It's because the same Jinn has jumped to them and making them act in exactly the same way. And it's done to drive the empathic parent crazy. So it's not a coincidence when you see your son acting exactly like his father, or your daughter acting exactly like their mother. You just ask yourself, what on earth is going on? It's because of that. Jinns can jump into different bodies that are susceptible to that. So if you're not reading your adhkar, if you've got no protection whatsoever, then people's jinns will jump in and out of you. And that's why, sometimes you'll have character changes that are very erratic. So one moment you're super nice, you're so lovely, kind. The teenager might be a really wonderful person, and then all of a sudden they switch and they turn into an ugly, horrid monster. In the same hour sometimes. It's the jumping of the jinn, okay, in and out of their bodies. And it can also be waswas. So if they're not possessed by an external jinn, they can also be influenced by the waswas. So they might get intrusive thoughts that might just make their mood switch all of a sudden, and they go back to being in a bad mood, or they go back to thinking negatively about you, because the qareen, when he sees that the teenager is getting on well with the empathic mother, they don't like that. They're like, no, I've got to ruin this moment. I've got to ruin this relationship. Let me remind this teenager of why they don't like their mother. Intrusive thoughts come in, and all of a sudden they switch. A great day turns into a bad one. And, you sitting with your teenager for a while, it just becomes like a temporary moment where you can have a nice time with them before they start hating you again and before they start being disrespectful and rude and all of that. So this is the explanation for it. Now, another reason why teenagers might be rebellious and really disrespectful, it can be your approach. Okay, so I'm going back to the point that I made earlier about the approach. Sometimes parents are too strict, especially on girls. So they'll see a girl, their daughter, dressing in an inappropriate way, too much makeup, she's the way she is, her attitude, she's a drama queen, all of that. If your approach to that is with aggression and shouting and screaming and constant punishments until she changes, you're going to lose that child. I promise you're going to lose that child. They will get 10 times worse as soon as they have freedom. As soon as they get into that college away from home or that university away from home, they might even become atheist. They might lose their deen completely because you've lost them with that approach. And that's why you see so many imams and scholars and sheikhs and preachers. They have children, teenage children and young adults who completely rebelled. And people ask, how on earth did the son of a sheikh or the daughter of that Quran teacher become so rebellious? She now works in a strip club, or she works in a bar, or she's got a lesbian wife now, or whatever. How did that happen? It's because the religious approach is too strict and too harsh, and there's a lack of understanding and education in these matters that happen with teenagers, right? Like jinn possession, qareen control, all of that. When parents don't understand it, even if they're sheikhs and scholars and imams, if they don't understand it, they will never know how to approach their teenagers correctly and teach them how to deal with this. Okay, so many people have lost their children as a result of being too strict and not understanding and not loving in their approach. They've got to be kind. You've got to be loving in your approach with teenagers because, like I said, they've got traumas. They've got so much bottled up from what they've seen in their lives that they've never been able to express to you. So to add to that, the strictness of, the discipline, or especially when it comes from religion, you're going to push them away from the deen. You're going to push them away. You're going to make them hate anything to do with religion because they're now looking at you as people who just don't understand. You're just like parrots. You just say the same thing over and over and over again, but make no effort to understand what's actually going on with these teenagers and what's happening in their lives. So they genuinely don't believe that you care about them, and all you want to do is stuff religion down their throats. So that's why we have such a high number of young adult Muslims leaving Islam, because of how religion was used to discipline them and to keep them in line. As soon as they find any bit of freedom, they're gone. They've gone the completely other way. Okay? They need to find love and kindness with these things. Now, when you're an empath and you've got an empathic partner and you happen to have that one child who comes out to be narcissistic, the trauma might not be from the family. The trauma might be in an experience they might have had outside the home. So, for example, they might have been sexually abused somewhere or heavily bullied somewhere. And this is the trauma they carry, but they're unable to speak to you about it. And if they're unable to speak to you about it, there's something wrong with your tarbiyah. Okay, there's a big problem with the way you have raised your children to communicate. Because I promise you, 2 empath parents will be able to deal with a narcissistic child from very early on, because they'll be nurturing, kind, empathic, compassionate, understanding, all of that. And the communication will be good. So you often find sometimes that parents actually know how to navigate that. If they're aware of NPD, they're aware of the jinn issues, spiritual problems. If two parents are aware of that, you'll have no problem raising kids. But if you're not aware of that, then the child who has narcissistic traits will become your trial from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will be your trial in life, your hardship. Everyone has a hardship. No one is without hardships. So I'm helping you to become parents who are aware of all of these things so that your hardship is not found in your children by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this will at least lessen the trials and hardships that you have with your children when you know that this is what they go through and this is what they face. Okay, so it's really important for you to understand that communication is key when it comes to dealing with stroppy teenagers and problematic teenagers, so that you can get to the root cause of what it is they feel like they're missing in their life and why they're so angry. Now, a bigger problem that can happen if this isn't addressed and if teenagers are neglected and they're just left to do whatever because the mother is so exhausted or the father is so exhausted, they just can't keep tabs on their teenagers anymore. And, they're doing the best they can, but there's only so much they can do. Sometimes with these teenagers, if they are heavily influenced by the qareen and the ashiq jinn, they might actually start to see things in the spiritual world at night. Okay, so they might see shadows. They might even see jinn. Okay, there are loads of teenagers who see the jinn, and it might just be someone, like a figure at the end of the bed. I have a lot of men telling me that this is what they used to see when they were younger. They don't see them anymore now that they're in their 30s and early 40s. But one thing that they can recollect from their adolescent years was that they used to see shadows and figures and people in the house walking around, and they wouldn't be good. It would be the evil jinn. It would be evil energy that they would get that would keep them up at night. They'd have nightmares and all of that. And it's a common thing I'm starting to notice in men in particular. Women have it too. And again, this can start from, the teenage years. But women tend to feel the jinn more than see them. Men and teenagers tend to see them more, and women tend to feel them more. So a woman might actually feel the presence of someone next to her or behind her or in front of her, but a man might actually see. I'm not telling you this to creep you out. I'm telling you this so that you understand that this is critical information for you to know, because it will help you with parenting. Okay, I don't sugarcoat anything. I will tell you things how they are. I know people will get freaked out by things like this, but you've got to know it to help your children. Okay, you need to be so open with your children to the point where you believe them. So if you're giving them the impression that you don't believe them, or you believe that they're seeing things, or they should just, go and read their adhkar, and, they should read Quran more. If you prayed more, you wouldn't see that. If you did that, you wouldn't see that. If you tell them these things, they're never going to tell you about it. And they'll actually become tormented over it for many years without letting you know about it. And sometimes they can go into a state of shock. So when they see something like that or feel something like that, they go into a state of shock where they freeze, and then the qareen actually makes them forget about it. So they go about their daily life being absolutely fine, but this can trigger panic attacks later. So teenagers who have constant panic attacks have them as a result of seeing and feeling evil jinn around them. Okay? And you'll always find that the teenagers who have panic attacks will have OCD, and they'll have ADHD, and they'll have PTSD, and all of these issues. Okay, they'll be narcissistic at school. They'll have all sorts of strange traits. They'll be really battling a massive war within themselves. And they're being pulled by different entities in many different directions. So like I said, shayateen al-ins, shayateen al-jinn. There are good people who want to help them. They're pulling them too. Their parents are pulling them. Their teachers are pulling them. It's just too much for them. And they break down and they have panic attacks. And they can't explain why they have panic attacks. They can't explain to you why they can't sleep. Lots of teenagers have sleep problems. And they can't sleep until they have a dose of their addictions first. That's why they spend hours before bed playing video games or watching pornography or doing whatever it is that they do so that they can sleep. So the qareen gets them used to relying on these things to be able to get through life. Okay, it's really important that you understand this and that you take it seriously when they tell you that they're seeing or feeling things. You would need to start off with ruqya, and if it gets really bad, like if you actually start to see the symptoms of jinn possession on your children, like they start talking in a different voice or their behaviour becomes far too erratic and their siblings are now getting scared of them, you need to book them in for ruqya, professional ruqya. And you need to find someone who is highly reputable in your local area or your city, okay? Because sometimes external help is needed if the iman of the parents isn't strong enough to be able to handle, what they're dealing with. You've got to be very careful doing ruqya on other people as well. When you know someone has very bad jinn possession, try not to do their ruqya and get involved, because that jinn can jump into you if you have not protected yourself well enough. So sometimes you do need to take them to someone professional to deal with that, okay? Don't take it upon yourselves or you'll have an issue as well. So, I'm talking about cases that are, particularly bad. And you should never really do ruqya on other people if you are really scared of these kinds of subjects. Okay, so if the jinn scare you, if, spiritual issues and all of that scares you, freaks you out, don't do ruqya on other people. Because a raqi, okay, someone who does ruqya on someone else, even if it's just reading adhkar over them, you need to be someone who is strong in your iman and has no fear of the jinn for it to work. If you have a fear of the jinn, it's never going to work. That's one of the secrets. And if you can't find a professional ruqya practitioner, then go to someone in your family or someone whom you know who, has the ability to be able to read over someone, especially if they have high iman and a strong connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? But get teenagers into the habit of reading adhkar, reading Quran. Start by playing Surah Al-Baqarah in the house. It at least tames what they have. It might not get rid of it because it's an internal struggle that they need to deal with, but at least Surah Al-Baqarah playing in the house will tame any evil spirits around, okay, lurking around. So these are all the signs of, teenagers who have spiritual problems. It's nothing to be scared of. I'm not telling you this to scare you. We are far more powerful than the jinn, but I'm telling you this for you to be aware, okay, as to why teenagers can be so vile in their behaviour. When you understand why, you can deal with it more efficiently, okay? People who are scared of the jinn, and I'm talking about teenagers here, they will get to a point where they will be so freaked out by what they see and feel and what they hear in their head that they might come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I need help. I don't want to feel like this anymore. They'll be terrified of what they've seen, and sometimes Allah allows them to see something for them to snap out of the phase they're in and to get help, okay? So sometimes it's a good thing when they are so terrified by something they've seen that it forces them to run and get help. Like, please just book me in for therapy, book me in for ruqya, let me get rid of this thing that I've got. I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't like it. Alhamdulillah ni'mah, right? Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing if they get to that point. So do everything that you can as a parent to help them, deal with this so that they can live a normal life, a normal, adolescence. And let them know that the start of them feeling better and getting better will be them stopping all of those things that they were doing before that I listed previously. That, the horror movies, the bad music, the smoking, whatever it is that they're doing, they need to stop that in order for the jinn to go away and for them to actually have a chance at taming their qareen. If they're not stopping those sins that they will be accountable for, then nothing's going to get better. They're just going to learn harsh lessons in life. And Allah will need to put them in those situations for them to learn lessons. Because if they don't see the consequences of sins, how will they ever learn? Okay, so it's out of love and mercy that Allah shows us the consequences of sins so that we stop doing them. So that's the first step. Get them to stop doing those things and, be more engaging with them. Try and cultivate a more loving relationship where you listen, where you spend more time, where you, dive deep into the issues they have, so that you can actually form a better relationship where there is trust. Okay, if they trust you, they'll tell you everything, and then you'll have a better chance at, dealing with all the problems efficiently and quickly. And you won't have to deal with any monstrous rages and, turbulent teenagers. You won't be dealing with that anymore if you approach it from this angle, okay? So you need to explain to them that the things that you ask them to do, like perhaps, dressing modestly or praying 5 times a day, it's for their own good, and explain to them why, right? Explain to them why the prayer is so important for getting rid of evil spirits. Explain to them why fasting is important for them to detox their bodies and become closer to Allah. Explain to them why, doing a good deed a day will help to, erase the sins that they have committed that day. Get them into the habit of doing good things for themselves and good things for others to nurture their empathy. And get them into the habit of seeing the benefits of praying and fasting and doing all of these things. And you can do that by showing them how their life has improved since they've started getting into a routine of building a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And get them in touch with good people, right? If they have good uncles and good aunties, send them to Jummah prayer, send them to Eid prayer, send them to, socialize with good people in the community. Get them involved with other people and other friends so that they can see the other side of it as well. They need to see the other side, the good side of life, so that they can compare the two. If all they know is the dark side, they have nothing to compare to. They have nothing to aspire to and be inspired by. Okay, so always make sure that they have an alternative life that they can engage in, activities, get them involved in nurturing their talents and all of that, because this is what's going to be needed once you start dealing with their spiritual problems via ruqya, taking them to a ruqya practitioner. After that, this is the work that needs to be done. The communication, nurturing their talents and skills, helping them with their schoolwork, and just nurturing their empathy. So you want to encourage them to do empathic things for themselves and for other people. If they're only encouraged to do them for other people, they'll turn into codependent people pleasers. So it's very important for you to teach them how to do good things for themselves as well. And that's how you get them out of codependency. So this is the problem with codependents. They are taught by their parents to constantly serve others and neglect yourself. That's how people, they develop that disorder. So this is the approach you'll need to take. I can coach you through it, inshallah, if you need, one-to-one help with this, no problem. But in general, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to follow. Because once you reach the age of adolescence, you no longer have the comfort of seeing angels like you did when you were a child. Okay, you get cut off from that spiritual world. You now only see the dark side of the world if you allow yourself to immerse in these bad environments and in sins. So the more sins you engage in, especially the major ones, and the more you socialize in bad environments, the more likely you are to be in touch with the bad spiritual side and to see it as well. And you'll see it in your nightmares. Okay, teenagers will see the worst nightmares when they're possessed by Ashiq Jinn. And again, this is something that will happen to them because they have no protection. They don't know their adhkar. They don't read Quran. They have no interest in the deen. So teenagers who have jinn possession or jinn issues or any kind of spiritual issues will suffer from terrible nightmares. And many of these nightmares are of the barzakh. Okay, they will see people whom they knew, and more often than not, they will visit the dark side of the barzakh, unlike children who visit the good side of the barzakh. And it will be very rare for them to have good dreams, And sometimes they might see a glimpse of the good side of the barzakh, as their soul gets taken up to Jannah. They might pass the good side on their way up, and it will give them some hope, right? It will give them something to aspire to, and Allah allows that. They will see the good side of the barzakh before Fajr. I'll do a podcast, inshallah, about dreams and what it means when you see them at particular times and all of that. But sometimes Allah allows people who are possessed to see the good side. So it gives them hope. It gives them something beautiful to think about. And like children, some teenagers actually have the ability to see shayateen al-ins. Okay, so remember when I told you that children can see angels in human form, and that's before they start speaking? And someone asked me where the evidence is that angels can appear in human form. Well, Jibreel alayhi salam was the first, right? He was the first who appeared in human form to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to other prophets as well. So it's an indication that angels can take on the human form when they have a mission to complete in this dunya. And if you come across an angel in human form, you'll only see them once. So you'll never see the same one twice. Okay? And when you see them, you'll see them for a very brief moment and then they disappear. So most of us, if not all of us, have probably seen an angel in human form at some point in our lives, but we just never knew who they were. But only children know, and that's why children, when they point at some people and they laugh and they smile and they get really excited, it's because they've seen an angel in human form when you don't recognize the person. Okay, so we know that children get excited when they see the people whom they love, but when it's a complete stranger, that's an angel in human form. Okay, and animals do the same, by the way. You might find a dog who will stare at someone and their tail will be wagging, they'll be in awe of this person, but they won't move. They'll just stand in their place, but they will look at someone and the owner's trying to, pull them, like, come on, keep walking, and the dog is just in complete awe, but looks happy because he's just staring at someone. He's seen an angel in human form. And children can also sense bad energy, like I said before, and so can animals. So an animal will do the same thing. They will stare, but they will be scared. Their ears will be back. They don't want to be in the presence of, of that evil spirit, and they'll want to leave. But when they see someone and they're in awe, you'll notice that they're excited and their tail will wag. And you won't know this person. It'll just be a random person in the park, but the animal is in awe of this person. But they never run up. They never run up because the angels don't like dogs. Okay, the angels don't like to be around dogs. So you'll find that the dog will stare and be happy and show excitement, but maintain a distance. So they won't run and jump up on somebody because the dog understands that there has to be a distance between them out of respect, right? So it's just something I forgot to mention in my last podcast. I wanted to insert it here. But I wanted to say that teenagers, they can also feel and sense when shayateen al-ins are around, okay? And they're very sensitive. If they are afflicted spiritually, they will be able to pick up on who shayateen al-ins are, and they will not feel comfortable around those people, but at the same time, they'll be very drawn to those people. Okay, so ask teenagers how they feel about someone whom they don't like. They'll be like, I don't like her, but I'm drawn to her, okay? Especially at school, at college, even at university, you'll find your teenage daughters in particular hanging around with girls they don't like. And boys are hanging around with guys they don't like. They know that these are shayateen al-ins, but they're drawn to them because their jinn possession or their qareen control pushes them in that environment of bad people and bad friends. Okay? So I just wanted to give you an insight into that, because a lot of people don't understand why their teenage daughters would hang around with people whom she knows don't like her or hate her, or they are encouraging her to do bad things. We know that teenagers have this desire to fit in and to be like everyone else, but they know They know that these people are not good for them, but they still do it. But at the same time, they complain and they say, I don't want to hang around with this person, but I feel like I have to. Something's forcing me to be around this person, and I can't stop being friends with them. I don't know how to end my relationship with them. This is the reason why. Okay, it's a spiritual problem. So start talking to them more, start spending quality time with them, go out and do things that they enjoy, okay? Form a friendship with your children, and inshallah, so many of these issues will get resolved, because this is exactly what your qareen and their qareen don't want, right? They don't want you to have this loving relationship with them. They want it to be a turbulent relationship, so you have the responsibility of fighting it in order to have a good relationship with your own children, so they can stop a cycle of trauma from repeating itself. So always make dua for them, always pray for them. You know, even if they're in a very bad spiritual state, you do the afkar over them, okay? Read the afkar over them every morning and every evening. Pray for their protection. Pray that Allah removes, their spiritual hardships from them. And get them listening to things like this. If they have spoken to you about these symptoms, about them seeing things, feeling things, then let them listen to this podcast, okay? Because inshallah it will help them to relate and, find some hope in resolving their problem. But I always recommend that before you share my podcast with teenagers, please listen to them first, so that they don't freak out when they hear certain things, even if it's about MPD or, seeing things or feeling things in the spiritual world. You don't want to freak them out unnecessarily. So please do listen to them carefully before you recommend them to do so. Okay, so this podcast will be great for any teenager who has already expressed that they have very troubling spiritual problems. Okay, and always remember and comfort yourselves with the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not burdened you with the outcome of your children. So if it's been written for them to start their life journey like this, then so be it. Alhamdulillah, qadarallah ma sha'a fa'al. Yeah, this is something we have to submit to. We might not like it, but we have to submit to it. Because as long as you know you're doing your best, alhamdulillah, that's good enough in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rest is up to them. Because like I said, they're accountable now for their sins, and they need to be aware of this. They need to know this, so that they become more careful in the decisions they make and the life that they choose for themselves, right? It starts from here. Now, in the worst case scenario, if you are a single mother and you're co-parenting with a narcissistic man and you're finding it absolutely unbearable, you're trying everything, you've taken them to ruqya, nothing's working, they're too stubborn, they're too rude, too disrespectful, then in all honesty, I would advise you strongly to let them live with their dad. Okay, even if you're worried about him being a narcissist and how he's going to affect them, you're beyond that now, okay? That's the least of your worries right now, because they have the same gen as each other. So it's not like they're going to get better or worse. I've known people who have lived with malignant narcs and mashallah came out empaths. This is in Allah's hands and not your hands. But when it's a responsibility you are unnecessarily taking on for yourself, especially when the hardship is this great, no, give the children to their father. Their father has to bear the responsibility of this. And if the father does not want them, if the father has abandoned them, neglects them, has taken off, got married again and disappeared to another country, whatever it is, then you would need to accept this as your hardship in life, okay? It'll be your hardship. And just keep praying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you. But as long as their father is around, then why should you have to bear the burden as a Muslim woman of this when it's not your responsibility to take on? Okay, let them go to their father. Let them have a taste of what it's like to live with a narcissist. Sometimes they need to understand the difference between two parenting styles. And sometimes they need to appreciate the empathic parent they have at home, the empathic mother who's trying her best. And I'll tell you, after just 1 week of living with their narc father, they'll come back. They'll say, Mum, we can't do this. We want to come back and be with you. Dad is unbearable. Dad, hopeless case. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't feed us. He doesn't buy us things. He doesn't take us to school. He forgot to pick us up from school. You get loads of dads like that. And so for this reason, many mothers take on the responsibility of their teenagers because, they feel guilty, they feel bad for leaving them with the narc parent. But they're not 3 and they're not 4 years old, okay? These are teenagers now who need to start navigating life. They need to start taking responsibility and making mature decisions. And so if you need to send them to their dad's house to live there, then so be it. That's what you need to do to save yourself. You've got to save yourself and your iman and your physical health and everything else that comes with it, because that's the priority. Your kids will not benefit from a mother who is completely destroyed and crippled from the inside out. It's not going to do anyone any good. So to save your iman and your peace and your mental health, sometimes you have to give them to their dad, even if their dad is a narcissist. That's his problem and not yours. He'll be accountable for that. But they are his responsibility. And pray that one day, inshallah, Allah will open the eyes of your children and that they appreciate the empathy in you. They appreciate the mother you tried to be and what you tried to save them from. Only Allah can open their eyes to that, not you. Okay, sometimes they have to understand the difference and go through a hard experience for them to appreciate and wake up. Don't keep coddling rebellious teenagers. Wallahi, you're not going to help them. Sometimes they have to learn the hard way, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. Sometimes it's the only way they're going to learn, okay? You might think I'm tough, but it's just how it is, right? This is how they learn. This is how teenagers learn discipline and learn respect. Empathy is taken away and privileges are taken away when you don't appreciate them. Don't get them used to always having privileges in return for disrespect, in return for rebellion, in return for, bad treatment. You're only teaching them that it's okay for them to continually get everything they want from you in return for what? Narc abuse, and that's more narc abuse added on top of everything that you have to deal with before. No, it's just completely unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable. They are now responsible for their own sins. You are not responsible for them anymore. They are not young children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has freed you. He's freed you from the responsibility of what they do. Okay? So take that seriously. If you really feel like you've hit rock bottom in your health and your iman, it's time to give them back to their dad. And if the dad doesn't want them, then make so much dua that Allah makes this easy and that He turns the situation around for you, and get support from your family. Go to your family, go to your neighbours, go to your friends. Get some support. Okay, get some help. If you need help with your mental health, get it. If you need help, with role models and discipline and people who can come and advise them and talk to them, get that support. Okay, utilize your support network. And like I said, if you have absolutely no one to help you with raising teenagers and you feel completely alone in the world, this will turn into your jihad, okay, your personal jihad and nafs. Why? Because you've taken on a responsibility that's not yours. And you've done it to the best of your ability with no help. You think Allah's not going to reward you for that? Of course He will. The same way the man is promised Jannah who raises daughters well, the same Jannah is promised for women who do the same with their children, okay, boys or girls. And even if a man has no daughters at all and he only has sons, if he raises them to the best of his ability and he raises them to be qawamun, excellent leaders, providers, protectors, wonderful in their character, wonderful towards women, wonderful in how they, just conduct themselves, he'll be given Jannah for that too. Right, utilize what you have. Utilize what you have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you so much, especially when you are in a situation where you feel completely alone. And Allah has given you that opportunity to earn such a high rank of Jannah by doing it alone. Okay, so don't think it's a punishment. Don't think that Allah hates you. Sometimes the toughest battles give you the highest rank of Jannah because you did it on your own. Okay, there are loads of people who have to have massive support networks. So when you can do the same thing and raise children, wallahi, I've seen it. I've seen single mothers raise real men. And I've seen single fathers raise the most wonderful women. And it's just because that father had so much empathy. And, they were real girls' dads. The type of fathers who just, girls love. And when it came to the single mothers I know and have met in my life, they were strong women. They weren't weak women, they were strong women who were neglected and abandoned by their ex-husbands with no financial support, no guidance, no role model for their children, nothing. These are men who completely abandoned them, but because they have a strong character, they wouldn't allow these men to break them. They made it their mission in life to raise the teenagers, the teenage boys who they were left with, who they have been gifted with by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They made it their mission to make something of these boys, to help these boys become amazing people. And mashallah, they all are. I'm amazed sometimes when I see, what single mothers have managed to do with their children, because they had that determination and they found that strength to do it. So don't allow your qareens to let you be weak, and give up, and I can't raise these children and they're a nightmare. No, everything can change. Just follow the tips that I've given you, inshallah, in this podcast, and you can turn so many things around and you can become that mother they need. Every child needs a strong mother, especially when she's a single mother, and every child needs an empathic father. So you can totally raise kids on your own if you have those qualities. The teenagers who are raised by very weak single mothers are the ones who trample all over them. Unfortunately, that's the case. So if you have a very weak character, get help for it. Get counselling and coaching for it. I do help people with this. So if you're struggling to raise teenagers because you feel like you don't have the character or the strength for it, do reach out. The link is below, and inshallah I can help you be coached through it. So you know what to do, you know how to instill the right boundaries, you know how to discipline them properly, and you know the right steps to help them get out of this, monstrous phase they're in at the moment. If you're finding it unbearable. So continue making dua, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, because He is the turner of hearts. He can change situations in unimaginable ways. Alright? So I hope that's helped, inshallah. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening until now if you're still with me. And do grab a copy of the book if you haven't already. It's packed with so much information. And kindly like the podcast if you found it beneficial. Do share it with people whom you feel could really benefit from this knowledge. And do subscribe to the channel if you would like more related content. So inshallah, like I said, the next podcast will be about the man-child and the empathic woman. And then the week after that, it will be about the woman-child and the empathic man. So inshallah, it will be a continuation from today's podcast so that everything makes sense for you and flows in a logical order. That's why I tell everyone that if you're new to this channel, try and go through all of the podcasts in order so that you can benefit to the max, inshallah. So this channel has been created for people who can't afford counselling and coaching. It's packed with so much free information and help and advice. So there's no excuse, right? There's no excuse for anyone to not get the help that they need, inshallah, to heal and become better people, so that we can, inshallah, fix our homes and societies, brick by brick. So again, I hope you've enjoyed it. And until the next podcast, inshallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.